Well, I grew up in the South, in rural Arkansas. Well, there weren't very many schools. People had to do a lot of work in the fields. But when I was a little boy, I learned to read and to like it. And I discovered that by reading, I could be in New York. I could be in Chicago. I could be in England, France, anywhere. And of course, we didn't have electric lights for a long time. And oftentimes, I would be reading using a coal oil lamp. And my mother would come in and say, "You're going to ruin your eyes." And every time I have difficulty with my eyes now, I think, maybe my mother was right. But from reading, that really saved me when I was a child. I had a job working for a fella, and he used to save me his newspapers every week. And I would look forward to getting those newspapers. He would pay me $3 to clean his yard on a Saturday. But I would have cleaned his yard just for the newspapers. I would go home with this stack of papers every week, the Arkansas Democrat and the Arkansas Gazette. And I would just read Little Orphan Annie, Prince Valiant, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and this would make my week. I could hardly wait for the next Saturday to come.
My mother grew up in the segregated South. I grew up in the North after segregation. And she would always drum in my head how they fought for the right to be educated. I think that what I never forgot is how she would make me do my homework and help me with words she couldn't understand. And I always was determined to try to be something because I felt that it meant so much to her that she wanted me to be something she didn't have the right to be. As I went through school, I started getting the sense that people felt that we couldn't achieve. I decided early in life I was not going to let people decide how far I could go in life, where my benchmark was. I was going to decide that for myself. So even though I came out of a single-parent home, my father left when I was very young. My mother raised my sister and I on welfare in the projects. And I had a teacher that told me, do something with your hands. Don't try to be a preacher. Don't try to be a social leader. I made up in my mind what I wanted to be, and I lived to not only make that teacher estimation of me not be accurate, I lived to watch that teacher vote for me to be president of the United States. So don't let people decide for you what you're going to be. Decide for yourself who you can be, what you can be. Set the goal and pay the price and get there, and don't let anybody tell you you can't. So the issue of civil rights in the 21st century is education, but it must also be coupled with parental participation and with student motivation. It doesn't matter if we keep the doors open if you won't walk through them. We believe in you. You have to believe in yourself.
When I talk to groups of students about education as a civil right, the first thing that comes to their mind is black-white. This is not about black-white. This is about living. I would never go to school back in the 60s or the 70s without my notebook. I was always prepared. Every day when I came home, I had my 1 hour of homework. And so when you tell me that you as a student right now don't do that, there's something wrong with that picture. When I talk to them about the civil rights struggle, the 50s, the 60s, they can't relate. Part of the reason that they're not relating is because parents are not talking about that at the dinner table. So we bring parents back into the fold, and we talk more to parents about, here's a plan of action that's guaranteed to make your child successful. Will you sign on to this? And you give them strategies to use. How many kids get an opportunity to do crafts in the evening? Or how many kids get an opportunity to do filming or photography in the evening? We've got to do more of that. So we need some policy that says do those kinds of things to impact our children. But it takes a lot of work. And it doesn't necessarily mean 8 to 3:30 p.m. You could be talking 8 to 6, but let's do it as a family. So as we talk about 2008, 9, 10, I think for the next 3 or 4 years, the new president is going to have to focus on education being a civil right. What has not been done, what must be done in the future. I mean, maybe the new president will have an office within the White House on education as a civil right. It's got to be a national emphasis to make this really, really happen. You know, every day now when I see kids come to school and kids are more into their outfits and the rappers and what have you, that's cool. I'm not going to take that away from them, because when I was growing up, I was into the Temptations and the Supremes. But I can say one thing, I continue to go to school and I've made it. I'm not going to stop learning. I'm not going to stop giving. But if you love a child, you'll help them to know that education is a civil right.
I heard Martin Luther King Jr. speaking when I was 15 years old in the 10th grade. And the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. inspired me to do all I could to get an education. As a child, I used to get up early in the morning, pack my book bag, and hide under the porch and wait for the school bus to come along and board that school bus. I didn't want to go to the field to work. I wanted to go to school and get an education. If someone had told me when I was growing up as a young child, attending a segregated public school, had to hand me down books, riding to school on a broken down school bus, that one day I would be a member of the House of Representatives, serving in the Congress for more than 22 years, meeting and working with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., meeting President Kennedy, getting to know Robert Kennedy, meeting Nelson Mandela, and traveling around the world. I would say, you're crazy, you're out of your mind, you don't know what you're talking about. Education is the great equalizer. I participated in sit-ins at segregated lunch counters and restaurants. We'd be sitting there in a nonviolent, peaceful fashion, waiting to be served, looking straight ahead, and someone would come up and spit on us, or put a lighted cigarette out in our hair, or down our backs, pull us off the lunch counter stools, start beating us. We would get arrested, and we would go to jail. But we believed in the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. Before going on the sit-ins, we had studied the great religions of the world. We had studied Thoreau and civil disobedience. We had studied what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa, what he accomplished in India. We studied what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was all about in Montgomery. My folks, my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents had told me over and over again not to get in trouble, not to get in the way when I asked them about segregation and racial discrimination. But I was deeply inspired by Dr. King and others to get in trouble. It was good trouble. It was necessary trouble to make our country a better place, to end segregation and racial discrimination in places of public accommodation, to bring down those signs. I got arrested a few times. As a matter of fact, I was arrested 40 times, in jail, beaten, left bloody on the Freedom Rides, and unconscious at the Greyhound bus station in Montgomery in May of 1961 when I was 21 years old. Had a concussion on the bridge in Selma, Alabama, when we were marching for the right to vote. I thought I was going to die. I thought I saw death. But it all taught me the power of education, because education is powerful. That's what the Supreme Court decision was all about in 1954, when the Supreme Court of the United States of America ended legal segregation in public education. And today we must do what we can to see that all of our children, it doesn't matter whether they're black or white, a Latino, or Asian American, or Native American, get the best possible education. Education is a right. It is a civil right. So stand up for it, fight for it, speak up for it, speak out for education as a civil right.